Good morning. For those of us that haven't met yet, my name is Jeff LaBonde, and my partner Seneca and I have been a part of the community for about 7 years. Our kids Lucian and Cadman, and my family has also joined us this morning. My mom and dad and my brother singing along with me and playing in the next one. I wanted to start by expressing some deep gratitude on behalf of myself and my family as well. We are so thankful for so many of you who have supported me and us through 4 brain surgeries over the past 5 years. Many of you brought food to us when I was recovering. So many letters, messages of encouragement over these years. Even Facebook care reactions are very much appreciated. And a special thanks to Mary Donnelly. I'm not sure if she's here for this one yet. She drove our kids home from school for a few months while I couldn't do much. Thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. As I was considering how to share about this journey, it felt like poetry and prose was the way to go. So here goes. Epilepsy is a disease that I have had since I was 12. But epilepsy does not define me. In some ways, it feels like a gift that I almost asked for, and I don't want to waste. My family has always said I have strange taste. In some moments, it's beyond unbearable, trapped with Alice in my mind's wonderland for way too long. For those who don't know, the author Lewis Carroll had partial seizures like mine, and that's what his self-called greatest tale is based on. My words are not intended for pity, for shaking up or out, just a tale that shakes me to and through my core. So sore and so sorry every time, with reassurance from the ones who care, my mind still gets lost, in line with paths carved over every rhyme. Now, while it includes so many tears, to be perfectly clear, this isn't supposed to be a sad story either. I mean for you to hear how hope can survive, even when it's just barely burning. We are, after all, running and singing for our lives. Now, epilepsy can be hard to find for a very long time. In 8th grade, I had a partial seizure at wrestling practice, as my grizzled coach swore at the pansy I'd become. But I am still wrestling. At 16, I had one while I was making some bad decisions, like many of us may have. But I'm still a rebel. At 24, in seminary, these auras came back in greater numbers, and I still had no diagnosis. Was it a voice from beyond? Was it a special word from God? Side note, in my defense, that's what many 24-year-olds in seminary might sense. I was conducting a pit orchestra at 26 when my mind floated up on the roof to join the fiddler. And yet somehow that day, good fortune let the right notes be played, and I will always be a music maker. The diagnosis finally came at 29. Memories of a blurry siren ride, gaps in space and time and blood that I couldn't find. And the doctors used words that I didn't know or like, not at that time. And the stigmas and solitude of epilepsy became so real, as I learned in my 30s, when many old friends disappeared. By 33, the neurologist had learned that medicine wasn't working enough for me, as still the seizures came around sooner and sooner to feel and see, and I kicked and screamed and clung to pipe dreams for many years, until finally, the kindest doctor I've ever known, Dr. Joyce Liberace, helped me to see brain surgery was the path of hope for me. So at 39, I said goodbye to, as the neurosurgeon put it, about a golf ball and a half, not a tumor, a golf ball and a half of my mind. And for almost a year after, it seemed like freedom from epilepsy might have actually been captured, beyond a dream come true. Until, at 41, it turned out another chunk of brain was due. And while they were at it, they recommended, to be safe, turning me into an early cyborg, too. Yeah, me and the AI were like that. Quite literally. You know what they say these days, right? A download a day keeps the neurologist away. And now it's been 3 more years, or a lifetime, or a moment. And while many of my hopes and wishes have been granted, still, others have not, at least not yet. So far, that's the way the earth has planned it. And while my challenge is a roller coaster, we're each on our own wild ride. No one gets to hide. We have a simple moment, every moment, to open our eyes and welcome the inevitable ebb and flow of such tides. Please don't hesitate to ask me about any of this, the cyborg, the surgeries, the condition, the whole catastrophe of being human. Or the Eagles game. Last week was kind of a catastrophe all its own. It's not only me, it's 1 in 26 of us who will get to live with epilepsy. It needs to be talked about to undo ancient stigmas very much still alive. You can't hurt my feelings, and in case you hadn't noticed, I am not shy. Epilepsy is a disease that I have had since I was 12. But epilepsy does not define me. This is a song that I wrote shortly before I was diagnosed, and I wrote it about the experience as I was having in Wonderland. It's on the tip of my tongue. This is the one, this is the one, this is the one. And I've been waiting so long to find a trip beyond the fears of what I might become. And suddenly I'm burning up. I've just begun, I've just begun, I've just begun. I found a new song to sing about the points between where I am and where I mean to be. Believing is not enough. Gonna open my eyes and jump, jump. Whoa, whoa. Nothing will last, but there's a fighter in me who's out for dancing through the black cloud. Whoa. Ignore the fools who say it can't be done. This time we run, this time we run, this time we run. To find the strength to overcome. I hush the voice of doubt with love, and love is just enough. With my intentions finally clearing up, I've set my course, I'm running toward the setting sun to keep this new hope alive. I know there's so much more to go. We've all been here before. When everything falls apart, you pick up the pieces of your heart, restart. There's a storm, it's coming this way fast, and I know nothing will last. But there's a fighter in me who's up for dancing through the black cloud. Whoa, there's a love, but people just don't ask. And I know we've all been burned in the past. But there's a lover in me who's up for dancing through the black cloud. Whoa.
Thank you, Jeff, for your testimonial, for your music, for everything. About 20 years ago, a dear friend of my wife and I's was traveling in her Volkswagen Beetle from Jacksonville, Florida to St. Augustine, Florida. She had finished a long day of work, and she was chatting with her friend who was in the passenger seat. And she was driving along Highway A1A. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of the country, but it's a road that rides right next to the beach. And it's a lovely ride from Jacksonville down to St. Augustine. And they were enjoying themselves after a long day, and they see in the distance someone in a car seeming to drive a little erratically, but then it seemed like there wasn't a problem, and then it appeared that there was a problem. Then, no, the car seemed to be stable. And the third time that car heading their direction swiveled, it slammed into their car. And on the driver's side, where my friend was driving, and if you had seen the car after that accident, you would have thought nobody could have survived this. And so there ensued several months of physical therapy and intensive treatment, and she recovered. She was 65 years of age when that occurred to her, and it could have been life-changing in so many ways, but she went on in her career as a therapist to new heights, many thought, in terms of her engagement with her clients, her effectiveness, and her presence in the community. That experience that I had about 20 years ago was one of many that I have had as a minister, in which I have observed people over time respond to dilemmas and traumas and tragedies in various ways. And I have noticed over time there is a way in which we human beings can respond to trauma, which is life-serving. And there are ways to respond to the inevitable tragedies and traumas of life that are life-harming and life-negating. And there is a real difference. And so there bloomed in me a desire to understand more about why this is true. If what I had seen in the lives of dozens of people I had known well, if it had some basis that could be understood and brought to people's attention. And over the years, I have come to the strong conviction that there is something called resilience, and we might call it by many other names, but we'll use resilience today. The presence or absence of which can make, and often does make, a huge difference in people's lives. We define life in terms of years, and perhaps in terms of notable events like weddings and graduations. But I think it is also possible to measure life in terms of the traumas and tragedies we experience and the degree to which we respond to them. And the reality of life is that the traumas and tragedies that beset us are often hidden from view to those around us, but nevertheless have a profound impact on our lives. Let me define resilience as I understand it. It is the degree of the effectiveness of our response to a change that poses a major threat to our mental, physical, and psychological well-being, our sense of self, and our sense of security. Resilience is the ability to move from the shock of change to a level of functioning adequate to meet the demands and challenges of life. Resilience is never a return to normal, which will never be again, but to a new normal. Resilience can be viewed at any level, the level of the individual, the family, institutions, culture, society, and Earth's biosystems and any other relationship system, but certainly it is the family and the extended family, which is the locus of resilience, in my opinion. This is what I know and have learned about resilience. First of all, it is innate. We are blessed with resilience. We did not make it as a species through all these hundreds of thousands of years if it were not for innate resilience that's emotional, biological, psychological, and physical. But we need to cooperate with the innate resilience that is part of our fundamental nature. Conversely, people can work against their own innate resilience. Resilience has certain definable characteristics, the first of which is communication. There is no greater way to tap into our resilience beyond sharing with others to the fullest extent possible what is really happening in our lives. And the more people we can share our lives and our burdens and our challenges with, and do so in an environment that is non-judgmental and free of any kind of judgment, the better off our resilience will be. It is a unique fact of life that resilience is grounded in and based in our capacity to share with our loved ones and to share with one another what is actually happening in our lives to the fullest possible extent. But here's the other part of that. the people who are hearing what we have to say do not have to fix us, save us, rescue us, provide some magical cure for whatever ails us, but the act of being heard is in itself something which empowers resilience. The second characteristic of resilience is maximizing our control over our life and our situation when and where that is possible and appropriate. The person I mentioned at the first of this sermon could not control the fact that a driver under the influence of alcohol was acting in a way that was utterly irresponsible and almost killed her and placed her in a situation within an inch of her life. It did not help her that she could rail against this person and his habits. But what she could control is the circle of people she could talk to, the regimen of physical therapy that she could embrace to the fullest, maintaining a connection with her profession so that she stayed alive and she did not isolate herself. And these things she did, and those things empowered her. When a big change happens, whatever it might be, one feels as though one's life is no longer, in any meaningful sense of the word, under one's own control. Suddenly, the control of my life shifts outside of me in events, persons, and circumstances beyond my control. The greater the loss, the more powerful this message is. The loss of control adds to the anxiety of change and leads further and further towards the destabilization of hope and the self. In every single case of highly resilient people I have known or read about, they all share this one characteristic, that they focus with all of their being on what they can control and change, and are not immobilized by fear or panic, nor are they overwhelmed, but focus their mind, attention, and energy to what can be done. The third component of resilience that I would share with you today is the belief in something called post-traumatic growth. That is an awkward term, but it gets at what I am describing. This is what we are becoming by enduring the change, and we become something different by what we experience and endure. It has even been given the name post-traumatic growth. It doesn't deny deep distress or tragedy or difficulty, but rather affirms that adversity of any kind can unintentionally or intentionally yield changes in understanding oneself and others and the world. Post-traumatic growth can, in fact, exist with post-traumatic disorder and stress, but is in itself a real thing. It was identified by two psychologists in the 1990s, and based on their extensive research, survivors of trauma exhibited this growth in the following ways. They were able to recognize and embrace new opportunities. They forged stronger relationships with loved ones, as well as victims who suffered in the same way as they did. They cultivated an inner strength through the knowledge that they had endured and survived something difficult or hard. They gained a deeper appreciation of life through the experience of feeling it could be lost. And their relationship to spirituality changed and evolved as they became persons who had a deeper appreciation of life and everyday experience. Life crises are seismic events, but they have the power to shake entrenched beliefs that hold people down and limit people and force them to think in completely new ways about themselves and about life and about the world and about relationships. It can be, ironically, transformative. It is nearly impossible to evolve such post-traumatic growth in the midst of a crisis, but reflection in its aftermath, a reflection upon the comments of those who have endured trauma, can provide a foundation for growth. Survivors can explore how the experience has changed their minds, their hearts, their very beings. They can explore how they appreciate life in new ways. We can define resilience, and we can define what its parts are. We can understand resilience and know how to apply those principles to our lives. And in that path is great empowerment for each of us, for our families, and for our communities. Let us now stand in body or in spirit, as we are willing or able, for our closing hymn, number 352, Find a Stillness.